So approximately 4 decades ago, cane sugar, which was the most common form of sugar in any of our foods, was switched to high fructose corn syrup after it was discovered in the 1970s. High fructose corn syrup is a corn-derived sweetener, and today it's the most common sweetener in any of our processed foods. Since that time, since the discovery of high fructose corn syrup, there's been a significant increase in obesity across the United States. So common questions among the nutrition field and the medical field are, what are the causes of this sudden rise in obesity, and could these two things be linked? Could the discovery of high fructose corn syrup and the rise in obesity be linked? So my main claim is that the increased consumption of high fructose corn syrup over the last 2 to 3 decades has been a major contributing factor to the rise in obesity across the United States. The supporting claims I have for this are that high fructose corn syrup alters the normal metabolism that occurs in our body for carbohydrates. High fructose corn syrup has also become ubiquitous among our processed foods across the states. And the third supporting claim is that the combination of these two, the commonality of high fructose corn syrup in our foods and the change in metabolism has been a cause of obesity in the United States. So the first claim that high fructose corn syrup alters our metabolism and increases our risk of predisposition to diabetes and other obesity-linked diseases like cardiovascular disease. According to the Journal of American Dietetics Association, fructose is better absorbed when it's consumed as sucrose. Sucrose is the form of sugar that we have on the table. It's just table sugar. Sucrose is a 1-to-1 ratio of the two sugars, glucose and fructose, whereas high fructose corn syrup is a 4-to-1 ratio. So there's more fructose, it's more dense in high fructose corn syrup. Also, according to the Journal of American Dietetics Association, high intakes of fructose increase our energy intake and our obesity risk through blunting of circulating insulin. So the insulin response that is supposed to occur when we intake fructose doesn't happen because the response elements that are supposed to respond with insulin are blunted by the high fructose intake. Fructose is rapidly metabolized in the liver, which increases our triglyceride levels in our blood and increases the fats that are stored in our liver. According to Dana Flavin, MS, MD, PhD, and author of Metabolic Danger of High Fructose Corn Syrup, metabolism of excess amounts of fructose is a major concern. So it's recognized among the medical community that high fructose in our diet is a reason for concern. My secondary claim that high fructose corn syrup has become ubiquitous among American processed foods is supported by also Dana Flavin, the author of The Dangers of High Fructose Corn Syrup, states that high fructose corn syrup is now the primary caloric sweetener added to soft drinks in the United States and comprises approximately 40% of caloric sweeteners added to foods and beverages. So most of us don't even realize how much we're intaking per day of high fructose corn syrup. The average intake of Americans over 2 decades ago was approximately half an ounce or 15 grams of fructose, and that has increased to today's average, which is approximately 3 ounces or 81 grams. And that's per day for just average. The third claim was that the combination of these two factors has led to an increase in obesity across the United States. So, and other diseases linked to obesity. The Journal of American Dietetics Association states that the blunted insulin response that I discussed earlier results in a diminished ability of the body to inhibit food intake, which might result in increased energy consumption. So because we're not getting the insulin response that we're supposed to from the sugar, we intake more energy from food because we don't feel full. Isabel Contento, the author of Nutrition Education Linking Research, stated that in 1990, obesity rates in most states were below 14%. Now most states have an obesity rate of 20% or more. This was supported by the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, which states that the highest state with the highest levels of obesity is Mississippi with 34.4%, California is currently at 24.8, and the lowest state is 18.6, which is Colorado. So even the lowest state is still quite a bit above 14%. Barry Popkin, the author of Proposed Guidance System for Beverage Consumption, stated that between 1977 and 2001, the proportion of energy obtained from calorically sweetened soft drinks and fruit drinks has increased by threefold, and that's approximately 50 calories to 144 calories per day. So as you can see, the increase in fructose across those last few decades is directly linked to the rise in obesity. In conclusion, the increase in fructose in everyday food and drink consumption for the average American has increased, and because it's changing the diet of the average American and also changing the way we metabolize that sugar, it's responsible for the increase in the average American waistline.
All right, the background information is fine. You've got a very clear statement of what your goal is. All the organizational issues are previewed for us, and then you signpost very clearly as you go through them. I thought the second point needed a lot more development, especially when you talk about the different metabolisms and the ratios, and it's still not clear to me why the ratio of consumption matters, and you talk about the triglycerides and how the metabolism issue is affected by or affects those kinds of things, and what's the inference as a consequence? Does that mean that we're not, that we're taking in, we're actually failing to process the calories correctly, we're storing them differently, and I think we need some data on that. There's some conclusionary quotes there, but everybody that you cited seemed very authoritative. You did a good job citing the quality of the evidence, and I appreciated that very much. The first point seemed like there's a lot of explanation on it, and most of the argument, the inferences, come on the second and third points. For instance, at one point you're talking about how our caloric intake is substantially increased based on the soda that we consume, and my question is, well, why is it unique that it's high fructose corn syrup as opposed to sugar if the source of the problem is that we've increased our caloric intake through sodas? Then I guess the argument is if our caloric intake is relatively the same as it once was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but we're still having this much greater effect, then there's some relationship to the high fructose corn syrup, and I think that that needed to be clarified a little bit. I thought that you needed a little bit more summary, but I like the exit line at the end. I thought that worked pretty well. All right, thank you.